Everyone, and welcome to the Fun for Women and Girls Blueprint Lunch Series. This is our second one in our series. This afternoon's presentation will be Love Shouldn't Hurt, Teen Dating Violence, and we have a special guest speaker, Amelia from the Domestic Violence Center of Chester County. She's the Director of Education there. Joining us as well is Kim Andrews, the Executive Director here at the Fund. And I want to thank you all for joining us. This presentation, we're going to feature a blueprint report and the information in there relating to this topic. We're going to start with our presentation with an initial overview of the blueprint from Kim, and then we'll move on to a presentation from Amelia. And then we'll conclude with some additional data that we have within our blueprint report on this topic. I do want to share with folks who are attending, this information can be very sensitive. So I want to encourage anybody who is struggling with any of the content to not hesitate to walk away if they need to. It's completely understandable. And during the presentation, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A box. I will act as a moderator and I will jump in at the beginning, middle, end, depending on when questions occur. And we will also have an open question section at the very end of the presentation. So at this time, I will turn it over to Kim.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Blake. I'm so glad to be here today to talk about this important topic. I'm so glad of our speaker today. We're all here today because we believe that women and girls should have equality and security, and that makes our communities stronger and it makes our communities more vibrant for everybody. Just to give you a little information about the Blueprint Report. The Fund for Women and Girls, we completed our 4th edition of the Blueprint Report, which is the first and only comprehensive assessment of women and girls in Chester County. So we've published this 4 times, 2005, 2011, 2016, and then in 2022. And it's a deep dive on conditions of women and girls here in Chester County. So the data that we identify in our report shows areas of progress, areas where needs still exist and challenges still exist. It provides data across employment and earnings, work and family, educational disparities, poverty and opportunity, reproductive rights, health and well-being, violence and safety, and political participation. This data is used by organizations all across Chester County for community action, for policymaking, budgeting, program staffing, staff deployment, case statements, and fundraising. Our Blueprint Report, since we began it, has brought in millions and millions of dollars into Chester County for nonprofits and organizations to provide services to our community. As an organization, we work with advocacy and grant making. So the Blueprint is part of our advocacy work, and then grant making is grants that we put out to small nonprofits and large nonprofits like the Domestic Violence Center of Chester County that support women and girls. And we've given out over $4 million since 1996. So we're here to ignite change in the present and then into the future. We're really honored to have our guest today, Amelia Rayburn-Pizzica from the Domestic Violence Center of Chester County, to talk about teen violence and sexual assault. Well, I've got nothing further to say about that. I'd like to introduce Amelia so she can tell us what she knows from her deep knowledge of what's happening and what we can all do. Amelia?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much, Kim. We are so grateful for the Fund's continued support of the work that we do in the community, but also for this opportunity to have a conversation with you all about teen dating abuse specifically, and how sexual violence actually is involved and has been a recurring trend we've been seeing when we talk about teen dating abuse in Chester County. So first and foremost, I just want to clear up any misconceptions about what domestic violence is. People hear domestic violence, and I think a lot of times they think specifically about married couples and couples that are living together. However, when we talk about domestic violence here at DVCCC, what we mean is abuse within a family unit, or abuse within an intimate partnership. And when we talk about intimate partnerships, that goes beyond just marriages and relationships in which we're living together, but also talking about dating relationships, including teen dating abuse and teen dating violence. So we are really proud at the Domestic Violence Center to be able to provide services for individuals who are experiencing teen dating abuse, but we're also really proud to be able to provide different prevention and education initiatives and programs for teens. We reach over 2,500 teens in over a dozen public, private, and charter schools here in Chester County with our education and prevention programs. These include our Coaching Boys into Men program, in which we train and support the coaches of athletic teams to talk to their athletes about the issues of abuse in relationships, disrespect in relationships, and how to prevent that by being active bystanders and leaders in their own communities. Our Coaching Girls Beyond the Game program is a newer iteration of that we've been utilizing and we're really excited about. But what we're really going to dive into and talk about today is our teen dating violence programming and initiatives. We provide in-class and in organizations, in-person and virtual programming for teens about the issue of teen dating violence and teen dating abuse. So we give teens an understanding of dating violence. What does it look like? How does it feel? Because one thing that we want to drive forward is that domestic violence goes beyond just physical violence and physical abuse. It includes psychological abuse, verbal abuse, as well as, and one thing we've seen increasing is sexual violence and sexual abuse. And so we collect a lot of data as well as we give these presentations anonymously. And let's kind of talk about a little bit of the data that we've been seeing and noticing. So two questions that we start out with. The first is, have you ever experienced abuse from a dating partner? And these questions follow the presentation of an overview of teen dating violence, an overview of the types and cycles of abuse in relationships. And so what we've seen is that there has been a noted increase since the pandemic. However, pre-pandemic numbers looked similar to what we've seen now. But this all is kind of on trend with the national statistics around teen dating violence, which is that 1 in 3 teens will experience some form of abuse from a dating partner. And that's around 33-point-something% of teens. And so as we saw last year in the school year, that was almost exactly what we're seeing. 32% of teens were reporting. And then this year, we're still seeing that high number of 27% of teens we've reached reporting that they have experienced abuse from a dating partner. But even more telling is a follow-up question that we ask. If they have not directly experienced abuse, do they have a friend or a family member that they know who has experienced abuse, learning about this and thinking about this? And we've seen this be a significantly statistic that we've seen increasing over time, but over 60%. So far over half of our teens are reporting that they do have friends or family members that they believe have experienced abuse in relationships. And so when we work with teens and talk about abuse in relationships, we do an activity with them. We call it the sticky note activity, as teens have liked to call it. But it really is about relationship red flags. So we provide a tool to teens as we give these programs that gives an overview of several different forms of red flag behaviors, unhealthy behaviors that you can see from a dating partner that might not be abusive per se yet, but if these behaviors are left unchecked, they can build an intensity in frequency, and they can eventually build and grow into more abusive behaviors. And, following that cycle and pattern that we see abuse, go through, this is that tension building phase that we talk about. So what we want to ask during this activity from teens is, which red flags do you think are the most common and most normalized among teen relationships? And so what we've seen teens answer through the sticky notes activity are several forms of red flags have seemed to be the most common and most normalized. So I'd like to talk about what are teens in Chester County telling us about the types of abuse they are experiencing from dating partners. So some of the key ones I want to talk about here are controlling red flags. So almost number one response from teens are these controlling red flags, controlling who you spend time with primarily, wanting to isolate you from friends, from groups of people, from specific individuals that they might feel threatened by. So a lot of times teens will share that partners will use jealousy to try and control or isolate a partner. They might use guilt and feelings of guilt to try and control and isolate a partner. I'm going to skip over tech red flags because we'll talk about that in a moment, but emotional red flags are actually one of the next most common ones we see. Gaslighting behaviors. So just invalidating a victim's experience, minimizing the experience, denying the seriousness of hurtful behaviors that they might be experiencing in a relationship. And what we often will see is that commonly teens in these relationships will brush off these things as, oh, it's just a joke, I'm just joking around. And a lot of teens report that they see that not only in dating relationships, but also in friendships. And then one of the most heartbreaking emotional red flags that they're reporting are ignoring you, not valuing you, not valuing your input, your opinions, your presence in their lives. And I often encourage teens to ask themselves, you know, is a partner who doesn't value you actually showing you love? And then threatening red flags are a common one. Unfortunately, we see a lot of teens reporting specifically threats to break up with you and threats to harm themselves. But when we loop back to today's topic, which is really about exploring sexual violence in teen relationships, what we've actually been seeing, oh, can we go back? I'm so sorry. What we've actually been seeing increasing, can we go back to the last slide? I'm so sorry. Thank you. What we've actually seen increasing recently in responses from teens that, you know, I've been providing this program in the schools since 2012. And in 2012, we've been talking about red flags and hearing from students about red flags. And then for the past 4 years, if you've seen, we've been really tracking these. And sexual red flags and sexually violent behaviors have actually become more frequently reported in this activity. So we are seeing more teens than ever before reporting that these sexually violent red flags are the most common and most normalized in relationships, specifically partners who violate your personal space, partners who continue over time to pressure you, coerce you, and even just bother you and bug you and ask you over and over again to move at a quicker pace sexually than you've made it clear you're comfortable with. But one of the biggest ones, and this goes in with that technological red flags piece, is one of the most common red flags we are seeing both increasing in reporting, but also increasing in conversations in the classroom is pressuring partners to send nude photos. And we've seen this not only in young relationships among teens, even middle school students, but we're also seeing this occurring at a more frequent pace among college relationships and even in some adult relationships. We've dealt with, the sending of nude photos, and then even further than that, the dissemination of nude photos. So individuals being extorted, essentially. If you break up with me, if you do something that upsets me, I will, utilize a form of abuse that we commonly refer to as revenge pornography. And I will share these nude photos publicly, whether I'm posting them on Snapchat, on Facebook, so on and so forth. But that's one that we've really been seeing increasing in severity and frequency and coming up in conversations. And I think that teens feel so, and individuals in general feel so disconnected from that being a form of sexual abuse because they think of it as more technological abuse, this constant texting, constant calling, going through your phone, checking who you're talking to, and then, having things in your phone that you can then post takes away the feeling, I think, of severity of that and takes away the general conceptualization of that experience as sexual assault and sexual violence, which it is. That is a form of sexual abuse in relationships. So we can move on now from this slide. Thank you. So a lot of the questions that come up when we talk to adults about teen relationships that are abusive, a lot of the questions like, why would a teen stay in a relationship like that? And we get that question often about all victims of abuse, is why do they stay? Why don't they leave? And, it's a question that we try to avoid because it is a very, unfortunately, at its core, victim blaming kind of question. But it is a great question. It's a question that I think a lot of parents want to know. It's like, why would my teen be in a relationship like that or stay in a relationship like that? So the first reason is lack of information, lack of understanding of healthy versus unhealthy relationship behaviors, what really is constituted as abuse in a relationship. And so that's why we're really proud to continue to grow and increase our education and outreach for teens so that they can have that knowledge and information and access to that information. Their relationship with their parents, if they have an open and communicative relationship with their parents, they are less likely to be in and stay in a relationship like that because they're open and communicating with their parents about it. And talk about like, what are the relationships that we're seeing at home? What are the relationships that have been modeled for me? So my parents, my guardians, the adults that I grow up around are my role models for how I'm going to go into a young romantic relationship, the romantic relationships that I've seen. So we have to understand, like, what are we modeling at home about power dynamics, control dynamics, healthy, unhealthy dynamics in romantic relationships? Then there's the fear of social consequences. Which side are the friends going to go on? Which, is this going to eventually make me not part of like a clique or a crew of friends that I want to be a part of? There are significant social consequences, especially with abusive relationships, when an abusive partner might say, I'm going to ruin your reputation. I'm going to turn around and tell people you did this and you said that and you're crazy and you're lying. So there are these realistic fears of social consequences, embarrassment, pride, a worry about loss of independence, right? Sometimes a parent's natural inclination is like, I don't want you ever going to a party again, ever dating again, so on and so forth. And teens might be worried, I'm going to lose this independence and these opportunities and feel like my parents can't trust me because they've ended up with an abusive partner. And so they fear that loss of independence. They might have been isolated from friends, from a social core group of people who would be there to support them and help them. They might not trust adults in their lives, dependent on their experiences with adults. If I've grown up in an abusive household, I might not trust that adults are there to protect me or help me navigate relationships like this. I might just really want to be with this person. They are really good looking. They are really popular. They are really funny. Everybody likes them. And on paper, this looks great. And I'm, hormones. I really want to be with this person. And so that's a big piece of why teens stay in relationships that are not healthy for them. And then other concerns are protecting the abuser. A lot of times we see the media's coverage of sexual violence, of victimization of violence, really always questions, what will this do to that young perpetrator of abuse's life? They have such a long life ahead of them. And the victims often grapple with that as well, especially when they're in love with somebody. They want to protect that person and their future. So we want to give you a couple tools to better understand and help teens that you might love and care about or support in your roles as parents, as adults, as administrators, teachers, counselors, what have you. So some of the most important factors to remember when we're talking with teens about the issue of dating violence, especially if they're disclosing that they're experiencing potential abuse in a relationship, is the first thing is to have a non-judgmental attitude. If we're going in there asking judgmental questions and feeling judgmental, like you could have done this, you should have done this. If I were in this situation, I would want to do that. This individual might feel a little afraid to open up more. So we have to be very open and understanding with teens. We have to kind of go back to when we were teens. It was really hard, right? Remember the pressure of being a teenager? get back into that place, empathize with them, remember how difficult it can be navigating things as a teen. Then the important thing to understand is, as adults, I feel like when a young person is coming to us for support, we want to get into automatic fixer mode. I want to help them. I want to fix this. I want to give them advice, tell them what they should do. And what's more important, especially in the initial response to these things, is instead of wanting to fix things and take control, we should step back and primarily we should worry about validating that teen, validating their experience and their feelings. Remember to assure them that what happens to them is never their fault. It's not their fault. So, we talk about gaslighting, a partner who is constantly minimizing their experiences, denying the experiences of the victim. You want to be the opposite of that. You want to validate those things. Wait a second, they said that was just a joke. It's not a funny joke. That's not a joke I would ever want my partner to make about me. How did that make you feel? Hurt? I would have felt hurt too. I would have felt offended by that as well. I think it's a very normal response. I think anyone in your situation would have felt hurt by that, validating their experience. Remember to keep them feeling safe and keep that trust there. They want to make sure that they can feel safe and that they can trust you to keep their information confidential, but also trust you not to make a decision for them, saying you need to do this, you need to do that. They also want your respect and support, respecting their feelings, their experiences, their autonomy as young adults, their maturity level. They don't want to be talked down to. They don't want an adult saying, oh, you're not going to marry this person, you're just a teen. That's part of what they fear in these interactions. You are, in this role as a support system, not a disciplinarian, not an administrator. You would be in this role as a support system. And the biggest tool is to empower teens to help themselves by clearing up what they're inevitably going to have in an abusive relationship, which is a skewed self-perception. So we want to work on empowering them to see their self-worth, to see their beauty, their intelligence, their talents, their skills, their worth again. The things that we really want to avoid, I already really touched on, but I just want to drive home again, is we want to avoid judgment. We want to avoid taking control of the situation unless an emergency is requiring us to do so. When we talk about emergency, we can talk about mandated reporting laws. We can talk about a duty to warn type of things, suicidal ideations, homicidal ideations, so on and so forth. So unless there is an emergency requiring you to make a report and take control of the situation, don't try to take control. Just validate and listen and be a support system. Don't make any assumptions either. I mean, they might say something. Don't assume that you know things. And if you're not sure, just ask. The teen should really be the expert in their experience, and you are just learning from them about what they're going through. Don't blame or punish that teen for remaining in a relationship or struggling to leave an abusive relationship. There are so many things that we talked about that make it difficult for them, outside of the fact that they're dealing with significant psychological abuse and control. Abusive individuals, perpetrators of violence in relationship, they use psychological, manipulative mind games to control victims. And it makes it really difficult for them to actually see what's going on, this smoke screen that an abuser can create for a victim. And then the biggest thing we want to encourage you is don't minimize the importance of the relationship to the teen. Like I said before, we don't want to say, oh, you're just 15 years old. This isn't the person you're going to marry, kind of a thing, because for them, this person is at that moment in their lives, the center of their world. This relationship is important to them. And so some things that we can do when we walk away from today to kind of help this conversation continue, even when we're not directly interacting with young people, is the first, just keep an eye out for abusive behaviors between teens. When you see behaviors, even that are disrespectful among friends, call it out, gently approach those topics and question them, like, why would you say that to a friend? How do you think that would make that person feel? Keep an eye out for, and don't be afraid to be a healthy, active bystander among teens that you might interact with when you see disrespectful, unhealthy behaviors occurring between them. We encourage you to partner with us at the Domestic Violence Center to create maybe policies or procedures to help you maybe better deal with dating or domestic violence within your organization. We encourage you to discreetly provide local resources and referrals to domestic violence services for teens or even for adults that you fear are in abusive relationships. We encourage you to reach out to us and schedule dating violence presentations with your youth groups, with your teens. I've even gone to, homes and gone like groups of teens, parents organized a group of teens in the neighborhood who wanted an education program for their teens. I came over to their house and in their living room gave a program for the teens in the neighborhood. So schedule that education so that your teens have that information that can help them understand and identify these things in better ways. And then help your teens create a safety plan if they disclose abuse. In the Domestic Violence Center, we can help you access free safety planning tools, even free safety planning tools specific for teens, so that they can have a plan to not only address their physical safety in a relationship, but to address their psychological and emotional safety and well-being in a relationship. What can I do? Where can I go? Who can I talk to feel better when I feel like my emotional well-being has been compromised in a relationship, right? So we encourage you to help teens create a safety plan if you're working with them and they disclose abuse. And then parents, what can you do beyond these things? You can support non-aggressive solutions to problems in your home. So like I said, a lot of teens' first romantic relationships are based on the relationships they've seen, whether it be in their home, in television, in films. So not only modeling healthy love and healthy relationships in your home, but for example, let's talk about the next bullet point, quality bonding with your children during adolescence. So forming these warm, close, mutually respectful relationships. When you're sitting together and, watching something, or if your teen's really interested in a TV show, for example, my 13-year-old loves The Outer Banks on Netflix. I will sit in on some episodes with him and watch them. And if you see unhealthy romantic relationship dynamics playing out, you can openly question those, like, wow, if that played out in your relationship, how would you feel? Like, be okay with addressing and talking about the fact that Hollywood doesn't always do a good job of showing us what real life healthy love looks like. And so that's a piece of quality bonding and helping teens conceptualize healthy relationships and healthy dating in a better way, is call it out when you see it in media and things like that. And then impose and follow through on rules and monitoring while avoiding being a helicopter parent, right? We want to be able to give our teens the space and freedom to be themselves, to be independent young adults, and not to feel like we're constantly helicoptering over them, because also in those situations, teens might withdraw and not want to engage with us in more open ways. So we want to be able to show them that we trust them, but also impose rules and boundaries and guidelines and follow through on those things. It's a thin line. It's a gray area. As I mentioned before, a lot of the things that we can do to prevent teen dating violence, you can do in partnership with us at the Domestic Violence Center. Reach out to us and connect with us about educational programming, about developing policies and procedures to better support identified victims of abuse, but also know that if you care about someone, especially a young person, a teen who is experiencing domestic violence or dating violence, please reach out, even as a loved one, to learn more about the direct services that we can provide them at the Domestic Violence Center of Chester County. In Pennsylvania, anyone 14 or older has the legal right to access domestic violence and dating violence services all on their own independently. So encourage individuals to utilize these services. Everything we do and provide for our community is done for free, completely confidentially, and from a trained staff who really understands the complexity of these relationships and of these experiences. And so make sure that you know and lean on the resources that are available for free here in your community.
Amelia, thank you so much. Chesco is so lucky to have the Domestic Violence Center Chester County here. And I thank you for your service to our community and to the young women and young men in our community. We, knowing that there's resources available to support families and children and young people and adults who experience domestic violence and sexual assault is just, there are no words for it. So thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to tell everybody a little bit about our information and statistics about sexual assault and domestic violence here in Chester County. And then we're going to come back and have a chance to ask Amelia some questions. So if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat. We'll have a few minutes at the end. First, I want to tell you a little bit about our blueprint data and what we have around teens and young adults and women. As you can see, we've got a number of universities and colleges here in Chester County: Cheney, Immaculata, Lincoln, University of Valley Forge, West Chester University. And according to statistics, about 1 in 4 undergraduate women will experience sexual assault or attempted sexual assault during their college years. The statistics that you see here are dependent on campus size, of course, and also on the institution's reporting policies. Schools that diligently report and track sexual assault will have higher rates than schools that don't track them. So this is the information that we've gotten from these universities, but they are self-reported. There are, as we know, there are sexual assaults. Most sexual assaults don't get reported to authorities, so they wouldn't even be reflected on this data. The trend of increasing sexual assaults, as Amelia said, is alarming, and it shows the need for greater awareness and prevention efforts at our universities and our colleges. We know that campus administrators have to take an active role in providing resources and support for survivors of sexual assault, for encouraging and documenting reports of sexual assault, and then implementing policies and programs to prevent sexual violence from occurring in the first place and support survivors of sexual violence. Next slide, please. Here at the fund, we consider intimate violence intersectionally, which means the multiple layers of being a woman and having different races and different economic conditions. So with intimate violence by race, multiracial, Native, Black, and Latino women have even higher rates of intimate violence than white or Asian women. And what's not reflected here is bisexual women have a higher rate of victimization than straight or lesbian women. And this demonstrates that the need for culturally competent care for sexual assault survivors, that there are practitioners and support that that can make all women feel comfortable no matter who they are, no matter what their background is. Next slide, please. This is heartbreaking. More than 1 in 3 women experience intimate violence by a partner at some point in her lifetime. Victims of sexual violence suffer from both physical and psychological trauma. Being a victim of violence or sexual assault as a child or a teenager increases the odds of being victimized as an adult. Women are also more likely than men to be victims of violent crime that's committed by intimate partners and are more likely to be victimized at home. In 2020, there was 1 domestic violence death in Chester County, but there have been 109 deaths in 2020. There were 109 deaths in Pennsylvania in 2020. Overall, as you can see, from 2009 to 2020, there were 20 domestic violence deaths in Chester County, which is nearly 2 lives lost to intimate partner murder each year in our county. Homicide is the #1 cause of death for pregnant people, and 40% of all murder victims are killed by an intimate partner. So the sexual assault and the red flags that Amelia talked about escalate and progress to more dangerous violence and even death from youth into adulthood. Next slide, please. One, I don't know if bright light, but one means of combating domestic violence and sexual assault, or addressing it or approaching it, is the lethality assessment programs. A lethality assessment program is a program that has been implemented, well, it's been implemented all across the country, but here in Pennsylvania and Chester County, to help identify and prevent domestic abuse and violence. The LAP is designed to assist law enforcement officers in assessing the level of danger to a victim of domestic violence and to provide them with appropriate resources and referrals, like to the Domestic Violence Center of Chester County. Under the LAP, when police respond to domestic violence call, they use a standardized screening tool to assess the victim's level of danger. If the victim is deemed to be at a high risk of serious injury or death, the police immediately connect them with a trained domestic violence counselor who can provide them with safety planning and resources. This has been highly effective here in Pennsylvania and Chester County, with some studies showing that it has reduced domestic violence homicides in these areas. It's also been adapted by other states and jurisdictions across the U.S., highlighting its success and potential for helping to prevent domestic violence and save lives. We would love to see lethality assessment programs become standard across the country. Next slide, please. So here at the fund, we work through grant making and advocacy to advance and support women and girls. Around sexual assault, what can we do? The fund is going to continue to support, to fund programs that assist with preventive education and programs that support survivors and successful transitions to healthy and safe outcomes. We're going to continue to support and fund policies that support education for everyone and provide financial support for survivors, as well as increased protections for survivors. And we're going to continue to fund and participate in research that meets the needs of all identities, including but not limited to youth, gender identity, race, and sexual orientation. Next slide, please. Thank you. I'm going to send it back to Blake, and I think we're going to take some questions.
Thank you both so much for all that wonderful information. And I do want to open up the floor. I don't have any pending questions at the moment. For those who are in our audience, please don't hesitate to start typing away. While you're hopefully typing, please don't forget to join us next month. We're going to be doing another in our series of Blueprint Zooms. It's going to be May 18th at noon. We're featuring mental health, as it is Mental Health Month in May. So that will be our topic. And I do want to give another minute or so to see if we do have any questions. Yes, Kim.
I have a question. I always have a question. Amelia, a question for you. Looking at the rate of sexual assault on campuses, what role can schools and universities play in preventing sexual assault and supporting survivors?
Well, we've actually been working a lot with specifically Westchester University on educational programming. I think that education is one of the primary things. We need to talk to teens and young people about what sexual violence is, the various levels of sexual violence within relationships, but also the understanding that a significant majority of sexual violence occurs within dating situations. So when we're seeing these sexual assaults on campus, a vast majority of them are from current dating partners or even prospective dating partners that we are, someone we're talking to, someone we're seeing, the terms that young people are using as they're dating. And so while I think a lot of what people think is sexual violence is this stranger in the alley, an attacker that I don't know, it's more frequently going to be within relationships. The other thing that we're really proud of is that when we talk about the LAP program, all of our local universities, Lincoln University, Westchester University, participate in LAP. So their public safety is trained on LAP, the ability to identify more significant abuse in those relationships. On a more personal level, and I've talked with several professors, administrators, students, but like being a college student at a local university once in my life, I think that our universities also can make accessing and understanding Title IX a lot more accessible for students. They just put a lot of legal jargon up there, and they make a lot of the process confusing. And if we had a better, easily accessible breakdown of, how Title IX reports work, so on and so forth, that would be more helpful. The other thing that I noticed in education program that we did for college students specifically because of this increasing issue this year was that they didn't know that they can also press charges off campus regarding sexual assault. So they didn't know that they can also press criminal charges in these cases, and that it doesn't have to only be a Title IX thing. And I think that universities, for a wide variety of reasons, may not want to do that. They should encourage students to press charges off campus rather than making a Title IX complaint, because a Title IX complaint doesn't always have the result that the victim wants or needs. It takes a long time to come to a completion, but also like a criminal charge for sexual violence. I don't know how much that would impact the school as much as a Title IX complaint being founded would impact the school at the end of the day. So I think schools should also let students know that they can follow the legal system route. When I told them that they could do that, they were like, wait a second, what? Like I could get a restraining order through the county. I could do these things. They don't know that they can actually go to that level.
Wow, that's really interesting. And I guess it makes sense to feel campuses can feel just very separate from the outside world.
Yes.
And I can see how it would be kind of like just the psychological barrier of like, there's the border of the campus and that's where the police start. But the police actually, they include the campus too. So that's, wow.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I think students also don't recognize, like when you're a student of a university within Chester County, you're part of Chester County. So you can reach out to the Domestic Violence Center. Because like, even if you're from New York, New Jersey, California, doesn't matter where you're from. If you're a student at Westchester University, at Lincoln University, at Immaculata, you are a resident of Chester County while you're here, and you have access to these free Chester County services. And so that's always kind of been that psychological barrier I try to break through with young people as well, is like, reach out to the Domestic Violence Center because you are part of our community while you are here. And so many people stay. So
yeah, that's for sure. Yeah. May as well get a sense of what's out there. Wow.
And then one note I wanted to make just about the LAP program is that we collect a lot of that data about Chester County, specifically here at DVCCC. And one thing we've seen that's notable about LAP is that we looked at our 2018 to 2020 data, and then we looked at our 2020 to 2022 data. So the 2 years pre-COVID and the 2 years post-COVID. And what we saw was not only a 19% increase in LAP calls across the board. So we're seeing more police officers called to the scene of domestic disturbances post-COVID. We've also seen an over 26% increase in the calls that are being screened as high danger through the LAP program. So we've seen that increasing significance and severity of the violence that the police are responding to. However, as you know, you say, these silver linings in these very upsetting statistics is that 85%, which is the highest we've ever seen, over 85% of those high risk callers have moved forward with DVCCC services. So the LAP program really is doing what it is intended to do, which is connecting those at highest risk with the services that they need. And so I always encourage people, especially those who live within communities in Chester County that are served by public or by our Chester County police departments, so local PDs, because unfortunately our state police are not trained in LAP at this point, but almost all of our local police departments here in Chester County are. So if you're served by a local police department, please lean into contacting those police departments. And if they're not giving you a lap screen, ask them for one. If you feel that, you would qualify for one, know that the lap program exists and that almost all of our local police departments should be participating in it. And if you're calling because of a domestic violence call and you're kind of waiting and not getting that lap screen, ask that officer on the scene, hey, can I get a lap screen? And then hopefully they'll be able to do that for you.
Well, and I mean, I from a person I experienced domestic violence in my relationship with my ex-husband. And so this is many years ago. The police had to come to my house several times, and just all the unease and upset around that. And I think of the lethality assessment program and how intentional it is. And that it's just such an amazing step forward, because a police would come to my house and they'd be kind of worried about me. They wouldn't know what to do. They'd look around, and there was not really much, there was nothing next. I was kind of left behind. So I look at the lethality assessment program between as you had said throughout your program, just getting the acknowledgement as a person who experienced sexual assault or domestic violence, like this is not okay. I'm looking at this, and from my perspective, this is wrong. That as a person who experienced that right there, like, okay, that's the wake up call that somebody else is saying it's not okay, not just you thinking about it, but then to get the referral and know what the next steps are, because in moments like that, anyone who experiences that, you're just trying to keep yourself together without figuring out how to get through the next half hour, not how to get through the next week or next month or next year. And I see the success of the lethality assessment program and then the referrals to an organization like yours as just a lifeline for women, anyone who experiences intimate partner violence. So I thank you so much for your work and your service. It's just a wonderful, it's terrible that you have to be here in Chester County, but the work you do is, I'm wordless again. Thank you so much for your service.
Thank you so much. And thank you for opening up and sharing about your experience. The more people that are open about that, the better, because it encourages others to open up about it. People ask me all the time, do we think that violence is increasing when we see statistics increase? And I always say, I don't know. I think that maybe just people are knowing more and learning more and feeling safer and more comfortable and confident with what we've got going on here to come forward and get that help.
Thanks, Amelia.
Well, I don't see any other questions. I do see a statement that we absolutely agree with here. We do greatly appreciate Amelia for joining us and for sharing her wealth of knowledge. This has been so helpful. I just truly appreciate you joining us here this afternoon. And with that, since I don't see any other questions, just a quick reminder, check out our website, the fund, and you can get more information on the Blueprint report. We will certainly be posting about our next session. And also please check out the DVCCC website and see how you can consider supporting both our organizations. Just want to thank everybody for joining us today and hope you all have a great rest of your day.